Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I realized after the last two episodes, I didn't tell you who I am. I'm Anthony Horvath, of course, Dr. Anthony Horvath, if you want to be like that. People are already texting me. I've given too many people my number. Oh, okay. Anyway, so hopefully everyone can hear me. If you can't hear me, then you can't hear me say, "Can you hear me?" So I'm going to put that in the chat just to make sure. And I should probably mention also that I believe I've isolated the problem that we had in the last podcast. The CPU fan on my computer was going, and I didn't realize it. The day after, 2 days after, all of a sudden there was this terrible grinding noise from my computer, which is never good, right? And so I turned off the computer. I didn't have any extra fans, but I swapped them around so at least the CPU was getting cooled. And so I'll be monitoring. If you see me a little distracted, it's because I'm looking over at the CPU load just to make sure everything's all right. So this podcast, the Gutencast, is a function of Gutenbook Press, one of my several publishing imprints, and it's a way to promote the books that we sell, the authors that we publish. This is not about politics. This is about ideas. I don't like being stuck in whatever the argument of the day is necessarily. So that doesn't mean that we won't talk about politics, but we'll start with the ideas and move. We'll let the spirit move us if we end up talking about politics, which we absolutely will do so tonight. I am confident of that. Then so be it. But if you like that idea, if you like the idea of not being forced to rehash all of the political arguments of the day and want to talk about deeper, more complicated things, not to say that politics isn't deep, but other things. There's more to the world than just what happened today, and that's what I want to try to capture on this podcast. So if you like that and you want more of it, then you can help, and I'm asking you to help by the whole normal YouTube thing. You've got to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, but I ask you to share the posts and everything with people. Follow us on X. I guess we don't really have a Facebook thing yet, but I'm doing what I can to advertise this, even throwing some money at it. But you know how it is. It's word of mouth that's going to make it. And I'm just going to try to keep this as interesting. Well, if I'm talking about it, I'm interested in it. So hopefully you're as interested in the things that I'm interested in as I lost myself. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, it's time for a drink here. Comment, no, you are about 30 seconds late there, OJ Wolf Smasher. Maybe even a little bit less. Why don't you give me another timestamp real quick? I don't know if you were here when I explained what happened the last time. My CPU was overheating, and I've had to put a different fan on it. So I'm watching it carefully. So far, everything looks good, though. So let's talk about today's topic. This is my monologue. The Ordo Amoris and the Cruelty of Charity, according to Margaret Sanger. You see the book cover up there. And I have the book in my hand as well. Wolf Smasher still hasn't said anything, which makes me afraid that he's further behind than I realize. So I don't know exactly what prompted me to want to talk about this today, but it probably has at least something to do with all the brouhaha going on with the USAID and the defunding and all the fraud that's being found in it. And of course, there are people who point out that there are good things that USAID has done, that it's doing. And so now, to me, that's like a setup for having a conversation about what kinds of things are we going to spend our charitable instincts on to do that, because obviously there's a lot of differences of opinion about that, and I don't see a lot of conversation just about that, like why should we be doing any kind of charitable things at all, right? And how are we going to choose that? How are we going to decide that? And when I was thinking about that, I was reminded of Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, bless her heart. And she has a chapter in the book that you see up there called, the book is called The Pivot of Civilization, published in 1922. And the chapter is called The Cruelty of Charity. And I don't know if you've ever read Margaret Sanger stuff before. But yeah, you're only about 30 seconds behind, I think, OJ. I hope. In 1922, there was an entirely different outlook on what the government should be doing to help people. So I'm going to read just a little bit about from her book here. I have everything ready. I'll just get it ready, get it up here. Okay. So you already get the feel for it just from the little heading from Herbert Spencer. Fostering the good for nothing at the expense of the good is an extreme cruelty. It is a deliberate storing up of miseries for future generations. There is no greater curse to posterity than that of bequeathing them an increasing population of imbeciles. You just gotta love it. You just gotta love it. And that reminds me of the court case. 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. Anyway, we're not gonna dive into this whole chapter, but I linked to it in the description, and there's also a link to the book itself, if you want to go into a dive. But here's this chapter, or this, I bolded this section, and you're wondering, how did I bold it? Well, because this is my website, one of my many websites. Hello there, Matt. Thanks for being here. So here's one of the things that she says. I mean, there's so much in here. I'm gonna force myself not to quote it at extreme length. So she brings up. We'll just go down here. She's complaining about charity. Its very success. I'll highlight what I'm reading here. Its very success of charity, its very efficiency, its very necessity to the social order are themselves the most unanswerable indictment. Organized charity itself is the symptom of a malignant social disease. And if you look at the next paragraph, again, I'll highlight it here. Our civilization has bred, is breeding, and is perpetuating constantly increasing numbers of defectives, delinquents, and dependents. My criticism, therefore, is not directed at the failure of philanthropy, but rather its success. Well, yeah, real nice stuff, right? And again, I forced myself to not read it all. Here's a nice way to look at people who need our charitable attention. This dead weight of human waste. This is after a paragraph of complaining about how much money, I believe, New York paid for taking care of epileptics, the feeble-minded and the epileptic right there. So, see what else I can say before here, this is interesting, and maybe I'll talk about it more later. She's complaining in this section here about all of the maternity centers. So, right up here. Childbearing is to be made safe. Could you believe that anyone could object to that? But Margaret Sanger does. It's terrible. This is horrible because what happens? They have the most dysgenic tendency. They allow people to live who should have otherwise died. And, you know, at this point, I'm kind of just repeating itself here. What else? Yeah, so here she counters the argument that usually people defend philanthropy and charity upon the basis of sanctity of human life. She says this is a Christian principle until war is declared. And then, you know, and that's actually kind of a fair point, I guess, right? You know, that I think that is something that a lot of Christians could feel in tension there, but she's kind of using it just to wave off the whole thing. Okay, so I'm not going to keep reading this. I encourage you, though, to get it. And one of the things, I was when I pulled up the Amazon link on this, Glenn, I know you're listening. If you want me to bring this up later, I still have it handy. Anyway, if you go to the webpage for this book on Amazon, in the comment section or reviews, there's someone who gave it a really low review, and they said this book is just a collection of lies that people attribute to Margaret Sanger, which is I thought was really funny because it's like this person read it and was so outraged by what he read he couldn't believe that anyone could possibly say it, and so he just assumed it was lies attributed to Margaret Sanger. Bless his heart too. So let me give you some of my thoughts, and then we're going to get our guest in here. So, obviously, what was going on in the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s with the eugenics movement, and obviously you had the Nazis, and they made a lot of the same kinds of arguments, obviously. It doesn't comport very well at all with what we're experiencing today, for the most part. I can tell you as a fact that there are people who share her views even today. I know that because I've talked with them. But there's no real threat that, at least right now, that it's going to be put into our institutions in any meaningful way, because it's just politically a deal breaker. I mean, people just would not tolerate it. But it does raise, I think, the very important point that when you are looking to have your charity run out of the government coffers, there's a very strong possibility that the people who are administering that charity do not share the same values as you. And so you will be stuck with and left with the very uncomfortable fact of having your tax dollars go to a charitable cause that you despise. And that's not a biased statement. That's a very neutral statement. Whether you're a conservative or a liberal or libertarian, anarchist, it doesn't matter. I mean, whoever you are, there's going to be things that you don't like how your tax dollars are being spent. So in my mind, given that kind of reality, this is where my libertarian... I forgot to turn off my radio again. Hold up. Ay. Jamie, next time, get that radio off right away. I'm just gonna fire that guy. My libertarian instinct is, okay, then let's just not have the government do it, and then it's just everyone can administer charity the way that they see fit. So I have a ton to say about this. I could talk for a long time about that idea, but that's sort of my bottom line. My bottom line is the government should only be providing essential services, and it should leave the charity to the people and let the people figure out what they think ought to be done with their own money. And you can incentivize it with the 501c3s and things like that. In fact, I used to be against those things, but now I've decided that I like them. Again, a whole new topic. But it does mean then that if we're going to agree, maybe, that we're not going to use our tax dollars to do charitable functions, then we need to be thinking ourselves then, okay, so now that the responsibility is in our own hands, how are we going to carry it out? Because it would obviously be a great tragedy if all of a sudden the government said, you know what, we're not going to do charity anymore. We'll do, immediate disaster relief, that kind of thing. But after that, it's up to the people, the communities, to step in and do it. And then what if the communities didn't do anything? So that could be a problem, right? So we should be prepared for that, and we should be ready to accept that responsibility. Okay, so at this moment, I'm going to bring in my guest, and I'm just going to get things ready here for him. He should be waiting in the wings. I'm going to turn this on, and you're going to see a big smiling face. Watch. Oops, I did it again. That's not him. Jamie. Where is he? Here he is. Oh, yeah. I knew I'd find you. I had you buried.
That's good.
So
I was like, oh, the heat map's going to keep popping up.
I named them both Glenn. And so that's the problem. So, so I have an introduction. I have an introduction provided me by Glenn, actually. So I'm going to just read it here.
Stick to the script.
That's right. Here we go. Glenn is a full-time engineer in the telecom industry and also an elder at Trinity Reformed Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's married with 5 children, and his church is part of the denomination known as the CREC, the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. And Glenn has been a friend for a long time. Do you think it's been 25 years? 20 at least.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably around 20. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
maybe a little under 20. I can't remember when we got started together doing stuff back in the old internet days.
right.
That's what I like to call it.
Yeah. Were you
the
on
old internet?
Were you on AOL?
What was the service we had? I don't think we ever got AOL. We ended up getting some kind of, what was it called? Net Zero?
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you remember Net Zero?
I did.
The
yeah.
free dial-up or something.
Yeah. They would always give these little CD or discs, right? And we had a friend. He would just gather them up, and every time they'd expire, he'd sign up for a new one. He was so cheap, he just would never subscribe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Yeah, I think we did that a couple times, right? And
right.
then we got some kind of stable internet when it became more needed in the late 90s. And then I can't remember what year it was. We switched to what became known as broadband internet when I think Comcast released it.
Okay.
It was like one. I don't know if it was some several hundred megabytes, or one. What was it back then?
See, this is what happens
Yeah.
when you bring a telecom engineer on,
Yeah.
because these all
Yeah.
have precise
Well,
meaning in his
you
mind.
you know a fun story. A fun story. The if anybody remembers, there was the ISDN connection,
Yes,
which was supposed to be a higher bit rate of
128, as I recall.
that's right, 128. In the private Christian school I went to middle school and high school for, there was a kid in my class who was from a wealthy family, and he got the ISDN connection. And what he proceeded to do was, with Napster and stuff, he
Yeah.
pirated all the music, and he would literally get you to tell him what songs you wanted, and he would burn you a mixed tape or CD back, because he also had a CD burner
Yeah.
before any of us did.
Yeah, those were the
And
days,
yeah,
man.
man, those were the days.
They really
Yeah,
were.
and you had all the people sharing their private FTP servers
That's right.
and saying, "Hey, look, I've got all my music over here. You can log in and download whatever you want. I got some movies and other stuff." Way before anything ever got shut down by the government and lawsuits. I still remember Napster.
That should be a whole nother topic sometime. That would be, it'd be like a nostalgic thing. Do you remember when kind of thing?
That would be awesome.
Well, but
Here.
today we're what are you drinking today? Show us what is it?
I'm in Tennessee, so I figured I should drink some Tennessee whiskey.
All right, you gonna show us your bottle? You got it handy?
There we go.
All right. Well, you've put me to shame because this is what I've got.
Yes.
It's almost
awesome.
An embarrassment, right? Yeah. So I'm going to drink some of it. Why don't you first, react in whatever way that you want, either to the Margaret Sanger thing, or if you want to jump on to something else, I have your images ready to go.
I will jump a little bit off of Matt's comments in the chat.
Okay.
Where he was talking about some charity being cruelty if it's based on false premises. What I was thinking when I was reading through her chapter this past week, some of her points were probably legitimate, right? Like in terms of the ill effects of free charity without any kind of accountability or training, right, or anything, which we've all talked about that since then. Like, since the government and the federal government became bloated with extreme levels of charity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have I know it's been talked about over the years, you have the decimation of certain minority classes in society that what used to be a healthy culture where husbands would stay around,
right? They
will not stay around because the government can take care of that when they get the woman pregnant,
right?
And things like that. So there's when there's no recourse and it's just free charity. Right. The other interesting observation, if I understood it correctly, feel free to correct anything that you can
I will.
that you might know better. That's right. The observation she made, it looked like in the around 1920 there was about 2/3 private charity and 1/3 state funded charity. Did that look about right? In terms of the numbers, I think it might have been with New York State.
Yeah, I think it was limited to that state, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's an example she gives.
Right. Yeah.
And so if it's interesting because I don't know what the stats are today. That would be a good question. Maybe we can ask the AI. But another topic,
Jamie?
right, that you recently talked about.
I just fired him. I just fired Jamie.
You're out.
All right, carry on. I'm sorry.
So yeah, but that was interesting because she probably was more. I again, we weren't there, but she seems to be more critical of the philanthropists, right? Yeah. And the private charities were a lot larger than the government.
Because they had more response. Because the government had not taken over their authority yet, so they were more active.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting that she may have had legitimate criticisms of what some charities were doing to not help people be responsible for themselves through the giving of aid. But then, of course, like what you read, she's just terrible. You know? she just obviously
Right.
there's no, I would say there's no concept of the Imago Dei, right?
Oh, right. Absolutely not. Yeah.
The inherent worth or value of all human persons, which gets at the heart of the character of why we love anyone, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, like that was just an interesting observation of some elements that she might have been rightly criticizing, but her answer was just god awful, as
Yeah.
they might say.
So, just I really have no desire to talk about this woman for too long.
Yes.
At least
Yeah.
not in this episode. But the one of the distinctions that we would make with her is that she's not just viewing it from the point of view of the individuals who are being helped. Like she views the state itself as its own as an organism with its own rights, with its own needs and such. And so if the state is infested with all these dysgenic rubbish, then
Mm-hmm.
the state will suffer. So she likes charity, but only if
I'm sorry, I saw the comment.
yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's delayed a little bit, but enough for it to still be funny. Um, so, and that was one of the distinctions of all of the eugenicist type people, is that they were not opposed to charity, but there was two persons in view: the person being saved and the state. And I think that really skewed. I mean, that's just a skewed mind. And it has a lot to do with what you said. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's no sense of the Imago Dei. Like you and I, we're together on this. Like, of value is first the person, and
Yeah.
the government's not gonna. When Jesus comes back, there ain't no United States anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's no state. It's gone, man. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the people go on. So that obviously is going to shape and influence how we view this issue.
Yeah. That's right. Um, there was one other thought I had was, and this probably gets at another topic for a future conversation, and you may have already touched on some of it in some of your previous streams, but the idea of that she expressed had to do with um, am I right in that this is like an early form of the argument you will hear from abortionists in the culture at large, who will say, well, so and so's their children are not going to have a quality of life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they therefore, you're just going to give them a life of suffering and all this bad stuff. And she was trying to make an argument for them not existing
right.
effectively, just being stopped, the population control arguments and all that stuff that she brought in. And so for me, it's interesting when you tie all these together, your respect for the value of humanity and the individual's worth,
Yeah,
and the command of God to fill the earth and subdue it and all those things.
right.
And then you look at the growth of the human population. A lot of the explosions of population have to do, in some regards, to the development of technology
Yeah,
and
right.
the advancement of technology, to where you had such a a lot of the reformers and even early American settlers, who are well-known Christian leaders and pastors, right?
Yeah,
I can't remember how many Edwards had, but a lot of them had many children because many children because not all of them would live.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
There was
right. Yep.
this lower expectation of living, and so when she gets on to complaining about the birth rate
Yeah,
in Asia, or
yeah.
might complain about the birth rate in Africa and stuff like that.
So,
We've seen developments in technology that have
right.
allayed, is that the right word, allayed
Yep.
the concerns, like the rice genome being decoded,
Hmm.
being able to enhance crops that are defense have better defenses against insects and sickness, and just farming in general has been advanced by technology. Maybe some of it's not safe, but I think a lot of it has helped the population of the earth not starve. Right.
Yeah.
So go
That's
ahead. I was
that. Yeah, that's like Sanger's nightmare.
yeah.
um, yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but my dissertation. Did I mention that I was Dr. Anthony Horvath? If anyone cares, my dissertation. I know,
Doctor.
right? Was on evolutionary ethics and eugenics in particular. Um, so I like fully just as you're talking, like I've got like I'm thinking of 10 sources there, 20
Yeah.
quotes over there. And like, oh man, what am I going to say next? I can say it all.
That's
But
great.
I will say that at almost exactly the same time that that Pivot of Civilization was made, there was a book that was published in Germany called Allowing the Destruction of Life Unworthy of Life.
Mm,
Almost the same year. And by the
yep.
way, I published that as well. Um, but those are the
Yep.
two German doctors. One was a doctor, and one was an economist, I believe. Um, they basically made that argument that some lives just aren't worth living. And in 1922, I think they were actually published 23. Don't hold me to the year too exactly.
It's okay.
I know I just bragged about the dissertation and all. I don't want someone to nail me on the year thing. But anyway, there was no Nazi to be seen yet in 1922. You know what I mean? The,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but and that almost kind of speaks to like my conclusion, which is when I said we don't want the government doing this because we can't predict who's going to be in charge of the government and have control of the levers of power. They might have
Hmm.
values that we despise. And that's what happened to the authors of that book. One of them actually had his family members rounded up by the Nazis on basically on the same justification that he laid out in his book.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
sucks, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. I looked it up. I was trying to remember it. It's lebenswertes Leben, right? So life unworthy of life
Yes.
in the
Yep.
German.
Yep.
And I took German in high school.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I, my dad's side of the family's Germans. Um, Came over, I think, in the 1700s, maybe,
Hmm.
well before all the 20th century um, trouble happened. But yeah, it's fascinating. That was that brought up another um, thing, if I can remember it. Um, you're talking about the life unworthy of life. Oh yeah, you know, as as bad as all the things in Germany were, it's such a sobering thought that all this eugenics was going on in the
Yeah.
Western world,
Yeah.
and it all kept going.
Yeah.
Right, it didn't stop, and that's what it was. The word she used, I was like, because I don't, obviously we were trying to avoid talking about her son.
Yeah. Right.
Such a terrible person, but she used that word dysgenic, right?
Yeah. Right.
Right, eugenic meaning good genes, dysgenic. I didn't look that up. Is it dys meaning
The bad kind.
you think
Yeah.
of dysfunctional,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Bad function or wrong function, maybe.
Yep.
So, so that was telling, right? I just kept thinking that contrast of she kept using the word dysgenic, and of course, what we know today is the unethical practice of
Right.
what we'd say is
Yeah.
eugenics.
Yeah.
and trying to develop the best genes. And we've seen it at its full. Like, can you believe? Can any of them imagine what it's come to? Right,
Yeah.
which is wanting to take genetic testing and determine through what is it? Um, the pregnancy technology to determine whether you want a boy or a girl.
Oh, right.
You know
S-
what hair color
Sex
and
selection. Yeah.
I don't know if how much that technology is tied to in vitro. That's what I was trying to think of.
Okay.
IVF, right? In vitro
Yeah.
fertilization. But those kind of things are just we've gone so far
Yeah.
with
Right.
the technology, and you even all the selling of the aborted fetuses, that
Yeah.
is the babies, like little children. Um,
Right.
they're using it to research the stem cell work to trying to develop uh,
So, do you know
good things.
Matt Bailey?
Hmm.
You do? Okay.
I do.
All right.
Yeah, I invited him.
Okay. Awesome. All right. I see he's woo he's gonna be I smell a flame war coming. Well, we'll let him.
What did he do? What did he do?
He's gonna get to a computer so he can respond appropriately.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
As long as you're listening, Matt, that'll
Yeah.
be good.
Right. So I think you put your finger on another part of it is that our technology has created ethical problems that no one could have imagined 100 years ago. And so, to
Hmm.
some degree, even though the principles are still there to be wrestled with and they're okay, the applications are so unimaginable that we're really struggling to keep up with it. Um, so let's just stop talking about her for now. And so JD Vance came out and he dropped that Ordo Amoris statement, and
Hmm.
like most of the country went, "Huh?"
It's great. Catholics are still love their Latin, right?
Uh-huh.
Is if that's correct, if I'm right on that, and it's funny when they can throw that in there and just stir the whole pot. That was great.
So you know a bit about this topic, actually. So
Yeah.
I think what you should do um, is just kind of, we don't have to talk about Vance or current politics, but just you know what, just tell us what Vance is talking about.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I've got his quote right here, so I can give that. If anybody's unaware, you can look it up on X or YouTube, and any of the media sites should have it, a clip from the interview he did. And in that interview, uh, he was talking about effectively the right role of government in the world with respect to our people, Americans, and not Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a trouble everywhere, whether it's people in our country or people outside of our country, and all the proxy wars going on right now. Um, there's this. He says there's this old school thought, or old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, which of course it is. Uh, you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens and your own country, and then after that you can focus and prioritize on the rest of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, he in that quote, to my knowledge or recollection, he did not tie the Ordo Amoris back to God, which is the foundation of it. But of course, he believes that. He was just trying to communicate in layman's terms uh, what his role is, like what the government's role is, right? Ultimately, and then what all of our roles are. But the general idea he's getting at with the Order of Morris is starting from yourself as created by God, right? created, as the Westminster Confession says, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. You have God, who you must love first, and then your neighbor, whom you must love second. And in order to love both God and neighbor, you also have to love yourself, which you can see in the
Sure.
concentric circle chart there.
Love your neighbor as
The
yourself, says Jesus.
That's right, yeah. So the only way is to reference your neighbor to yourself, right? Which you
Hmm.
must. I mean, no one's ever hated himself, Paul says, right? Or his own body, right? Talking about how
Yeah.
to treat your wife, who is one flesh with you. So, so starting with God and self and ourselves as God's image bearers, the Ordo Amoris posits that we order our love um, towards our neighbors in a ever expanding proximity, right? And an ever expanding proximity outward from ourselves. So when you look at that chart there, you can see yourself, then family, and then let me make sure I read it. Yeah, nature, tribe, other
Nation,
nations,
not
and
nature.
tribes. Did I say nature? Sorry,
Yeah.
nations and tribe, other nations and other tribes, and then ultimately your enemies, right? Because we
Hmm.
do get to the point where Jesus does say, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you."
Right.
But the it's fun. I like that chart I found online. I forget who made it. In To give a hat tip to them, somebody on X posted some charts that I picked up, and you can see that the darkest green, right, is your greatest love, right? That's God. And then you actually have a lighter green for self, which I thought was helpful
Mm.
because there is that aspect of the Ordo Amoris which posits that you do have to love yourself, right, so that you know how to love your neighbor, but you may sometimes have to give up yourself, right, to
Right.
love someone else, your
Right.
body. So yourself is colored green and it's closest to you next to God. Um, and uh, as you go out, those circles lighten up. But the base principle of the Order of Morris is, if I can get to that point, is that the entire scope that this chart, this diagram gives us, is that we have to love everyone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everyone receives charity from us, but because we are limited uh, by finitude and uh, resources, we um, we must prioritize and love those who are closer to us, those whom we love in more ways than those who are distant from us. And yeah, so I hope that's helpful. I know there's some quotes we could pull up. Let's see. There's Augustine quote. He says, "But if the Creator is truly loved, that is, if He Himself is loved and not something else in His place, then He cannot be wrongly loved. We must, however, observe right order, even in our love, for the very love by which we love that which is worthy to be loved, so that there may be in us the virtue which enables us to live well. Hence, it seems to me that a brief and true definition of virtue is rightly ordered love, or in the original, is Ordo Amoris."
Yeah.
So from Augustine's City of God there. Uh, and, and so if you get that basic concept, it kind of reveals some things to us. Number one, if we're created in God's image and likeness and we're sinful, right? Those two things, then something's got to come along. Someone, and and God Himself through His Word and His Spirit have to come along and teach us how to rightly order our loves.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem that we face in our society today, is going back to dysgenics
Yeah.
from Sanger. is disordered love, right?
Right. Yep.
We have a society and a population and a government that you mentioned at the beginning, right? The USAID, which
Yep.
we can shorten to USAID.
Yep.
They were funding Christian organizations and various other organizations and influencing other nations and tribes and
Yeah.
peoples
Right.
to disorder their loves.
Yeah. Sure.
Literally,
Yeah.
that is what our government. The meme, "Are we the baddies?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
we are the
Right.
baddies right
I
now.
know. Yeah. Which not to so Matt has brought up he's brought up
Sure, go ahead.
several points actually, but not necessarily to take aim at him per se, but he talked about how U.S. federal government charitable dollars should be made in the service of we'll make them we'll will help people, but it has to be in the national interest. And I actually kind of agree with that in the sense that,
Yeah.
in a very, I guess, more than in a sense, like I largely agree with that. Um,
Mhm.
to me, it makes sense that, for example, if there's a tsunami in India or whatever, that we have a whole ready to go organized group of people who can go and help those people extricate them from whatever ruins they're in, and get them back
Mhm.
on their feet. But there's a big difference between that, and this is my value system kicking in here, between something like that and using our charitable dollars to change values or influence their policies. Because in my mind, I do charity. If I'm going to do something for a charitable reason, it's because I care about those people. But if the nation is doing it, there's a really good chance that it's not doing it because of its people. It's trying to serve national interests, and so the whole motive is skewed. And if it's going to be like that, I don't want them doing it at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I was trying to get the chat over here so it's more in front of me so you don't see my eyes cutting.
Yeah, I know. I keep looking over at my CPU load, hoping no one notices.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Do I have it showing? There's the latest. Okay. So he agrees. The government should. One thing I'll mention for anybody who watching now or watching later is to look up the doctrine of subsidiarity. Are you familiar with that one?
I think
Where
so.
you have differing levels of governing responsibilities,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so basically, from I would say a reformational or even a capital R reformed position, right? You got Calvin, Zwingli, Bullinger, and others who promoted Christian commonwealths and magisterial reformation. uh, One of the things that they posited was right moving away from monarchy to more of a bottom up frame of government, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where they all of them stood on the monarchy and stuff. In that day, they weren't that opposed to it, and I'm not opposed to monarchy either. I just understand that there's weaknesses in probably all governmental arrangements,
Right.
but but that idea that comes from the Reformed tradition over to America, right, which was largely a Protestant or even a Presbyterian national consensus, uh, is that idea of local and up,
Yeah.
local to state to federal. Excuse me, need a drink here.
Well, if you're gonna take a drink, I'm gonna pour myself
As you
another.
go up, those governing authorities should be limited, right?
Yeah.
So more things should be done at the local level. And so in that case, I don't know what some people might think of me for saying this, but I'm like, yeah, I'm not opposed to the state or county even doing certain types of charity with money and
Right.
funds,
Right.
um, that they could either collect them voluntarily. I'm not sure about taxing, right,
Yeah.
to
Right.
to achieve charity, but there's nothing to say that government can't take part in those kind of things. It's because that's why the government's there, right?
Yeah.
To commend the good and to punish the evil, as Paul's letter to the Romans states.
Yeah. So
But
there's a real
there you go.
problem with when we talk about the government being involved in these things is that the the very nature and quality of the government changes the higher it goes in size and scope. So like
Hmm.
for example with FEMA, so FEMA is that the way it actually started. If you go back, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go, but like let's say
Hmm.
you go to like 1750 before the country was even founded. If somebody's house is on fire, the whole town, rallies together and tries to help put that guy's fire out, right? And so that
Yeah.
local community was always there to take care of itself. And then as the government's the levels went up, the government took over more and more of that. But for a very long time, until I don't know the 1940s, I guess, at the most, it was all just state level. You had trying to think the Civilian Air Corps, is that Civilian Air Patrol, I think.
Okay.
Um, you had different kinds of local organizations that that really carried this, and then the administrative state took over that the mentality of the administrative state. But the problem is so then they created FEMA, I think in the 50s, and it basically took all of the authorities that had been done by locals, and then the locals had nothing to do anymore,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
now it's a
Yeah.
federal problem, right? And so they just
Hmm.
washed their hands of it and said, okay, thank you. And everything's all fine until you have something like what happens in North Carolina just recently, where the federal government, they can't even possibly cope. But then the locals don't have the tools and the
That's
expertise
right.
that they would have had if they had been doing that stuff all along.
That's right. So I think that action by the government, like going up to higher levels of government,
Yeah,
inverting the doctrine of subsidiarity in some sense, um, is what has inverted our order of loves. Because there's a quote I think from I saw somebody post. It's from the Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov. Abstract love of humanity is nearly always love of self,
oh yeah,
but
yeah,
he was talking about this abstract love, and what the federal government can only offer is just this arbitrary kind of blob
right,
of charity and care that gets consumed by corruption, bureaucratic payments to
yeah,
keep people employed,
right.
right? It is all that bloat that
We'll
we
call it
consider,
overhead to be
yeah,
nice.
overhead, and it's because the federal government is so far away from the people,
Right,
right?
exactly.
So
Yep.
go back to that Ordo Amoris. You can only love the people best if you're near them,
Yeah.
right? When Jesus says, a lot of people criticize the Order of Morris this past month with Vance because of the the so-called example that Jesus gave of contradicting Vance supposedly of the Good Samaritan.
Hmm.
But that's part of the Order of Morris fundamentally,
Yeah.
because Jesus was defining who our neighbor was,
Right.
and he wasn't saying our neighbor was somebody over there in Asia.
Right.
He was saying it was an Asia, in this case, the ethnic difference between the Samaritan and the Jews who passed by the man who'd been
Right.
beaten by the robbers. It was the Asian who was in your neighborhood
Yeah.
that
Right.
had just been beaten and robbed.
Yeah.
It was his nearness and proximity to you that was the very foundation of him needing neighbor love,
Yeah.
right, from
Exactly.
the Samaritan.
Yep. And
So the federal government, you can't do that.
yeah, it can't. So it's not even necessarily a criticism of their motives. We can assume the very best motives possible of the federal government in this regards, and
Yeah.
but practically speaking, they just can't do it. And so there's like this that Dostoevsky quote that you gave. I have several thoughts
Yeah,
warring.
abstract love of
Yeah.
humanity is nearly always love of self.
So what we have sometimes, I think, is we have people who think that they love people, but they only love people with other people's money,
That's right.
right?
It happens 100% of the time with liberals.
You said it, not me. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll censor myself.
So like and that's I can see how that quote really works in this case because it's the love of the self, their own self, masquerading. The love of their neighbor is being actually cloaked in what's actually love for themselves. They feel good for being charitable, but they're not actually doing anything. That's I think
right.
the distinction with the Ordo Amoris is that it actually requires you to do something, to carry
That's
it
right.
out. And so you're not allowed
Right.
you're not allowed to go down the street on the Christian view and see a guy who's lying there bleeding and say, I'm going to call it Washington, D.C. and get FEMA sent here.
Yeah.
You know, like you are responsible for going. And of course, there's probably not a person in America who would walk by. I'm being kind of extreme, in my example,
Yeah.
but and it's. I think the problem is it's just so much. The problem, a problem is, it's just so much harder to love in this way. Our natural self says, what would be easier? What would be simpler? It'd be
Mhm.
easier if I could delegate off this authority to somebody else. And unfortunately, you have a lot of people who are ready to have that authority delegated to them, and they take it. They're like, "Thank you. This is what I always wanted."
Yeah. Yeah. The you were just talking about the the action aspect there, right? Of love. And I think that was in the double quote. I don't know if you put that in there from Aquinas and his Summa. Uh,
Yeah, I have it. I'll
he
get it.
talks about, right, the first part is, on this respect we love all men equally out of charity, because we wish them all the same generic good, namely everlasting happiness. I love how generic was a good word back then.
Yeah.
whereas we read generic and we're like, oh, that's kind of like, is that a little lame? but he just meant, general, right? So namely everlasting happiness. But second,
There it
love
is.
is said to be greater through its action, right? So you see that there. Love is said to be greater through its action, being more intense, and in this way we ought not to love all equally, right? So let's see, does he go on there towards those who are not connected with us? We have no other friendship than charity, whereas for those who are connected with us, we have certain other friendships according to the way in which they are connected, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, we love more those who are near to us, nearly connected to us, since we love them in more ways,
Right.
right?
Right.
And,
Right.
and that's the complaint of so many people, liberal, conservative, with the government and stuff, is that they're just so disconnected from you, nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
People complain about, oh, I got this person on the phone and they just told me no, right?
Yeah. Right.
But that's because they have no moral or personal connection to love these people, and so it just turns into a bureaucratic nightmare. And when people, like you said, like we said, it was flipped, the subsidiary was flipped and went all to the federal level. When people are relying on that charity, they're there's going to be people who are missed. There's going to be people who are neglected,
Yeah.
on and on, because the federal government just can't do that, as we said before. But it would be good just to contrast. I know it's a bit polarizing for our politics, but right now our politics is polarizing. So why not lean into it and get some
Sure.
people to come
Right.
over to our side?
I bet you want me to pull up a image, don't you?
The heat map, yeah, you can turn the quotes off if you want, and the other one if you can click
Yep.
them.
All
And
right.
let's do the heat map real quick, because that's been in a recent study. Let me pull up that information.
Ooh, it's big.
If anybody has not seen the origin of the heat map, but you've seen the meme, I'm going to try and explain
Is
it
this the
for
one
us.
that you want?
That's right. Yeah, that one's good. Yeah, we can blow that up here a little bit more for the people to read the text in just a minute. But yeah, that's good.
There we go.
It's from the ideological differences in the expanse of the moral circle, by Adam Waits, published in Nature Communications in September of 2019. And the summary of the research was that they conducted an experiment where they gave people moral units to spend on each category. So you can blow that up now if you want, to spend on each category from 1 to 16. And the graph shows how conservatives and liberals spent their moral units, or how they chose to spend their moral units, by degree of color, right? So the red is the more intense, the more moral units spent, and the green is the lighter, right? So when you look at the contrast, it's I mean, ultimately, I think it just tells us everything we need to know about what's wrong right now.
Sure.
Right? And it also obviously tells us why our politics are so polarized. We have completely different orderings of love. We between liberal and conservative, our ordering of love couldn't be more different. And because of that mere fact, there is no chance for unity to really happen unless, right, as Christians, we believe we have the right order of loves, unless people begin to reorder their loves, and the various aspects of society and church begin to help correct people and teach them how to rightly order. So praise God, right, that JD Vance said what he said.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, just to tell people you should order your loves correctly. And me, in my role as the government, I should take part in the government doing its role in properly ordering its love for our own people, whom we are appointed to represent and protect and govern, as opposed to people who are not our people, right?
Yeah.
So it's as simple as that. And so it's a great lesson. And that heat map is going to go down as one of the most, I say, it's not really funny, but one of the most important memes, right? We talk about memes. I love memes. One of the most important memes in our current historical debate. So
Yeah. So unless people don't, if they haven't seen this before, what's going on there is that the darker reds are indicative of the higher number of points that conservatives or either side has given, and so the conservatives have given more weight to the areas in the center, which is like your family or whatnot, and the liberals have
somehow given the most moral units to the universe and
yes,
rocks.
all things in the universe and rocks. So, I mean, you got to give them credit. They've really out compassioned us. I didn't think it was possible, but
there you go.
Yeah. So one of the things that concerns me about the approach of the Trump administration right now, with what they're doing, and don't get me wrong, I love it. Like every day I wake up and I'm like, yes, this is what I wanted. But the problem is that when they're successful, they're going to create a void, right?
Mm-hmm.
so like with the charitable type stuff or USAID, um, when 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 the federal government steps out of these areas, there's not going to be anyone who's ready to step in. And at least on paper, there's a lot of areas where there there is legitimate need for some kind of charitable effort. We'll just put it that way. There's no, I don't see a move right now for a corresponding encouragement and incentivizing for local communities and individuals to meet those genuine needs. And I'm afraid that that could backfire for them, even like just on a public relations like point of view, right? You know, the
Hmm.
just hypothetically,
Yeah.
there's a woman who is getting food stamps and now she's not getting food stamps and she dies, right? And
Yep.
that's gonna be the headline for like 3 years in the mainstream
Yep.
media at least. But there's no corresponding effort to like that I've seen at least. You can tell me if I'm wrong. To
Okay.
encourage and equip other organizations to step into the gap that exists now that they've left the area.
Yes. Now, obviously, cutting all the wasteful aid and spending that was for moral degeneracy is good that it's gone,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Just get rid of that. But legitimate aid, right, that is happening and has been a functional part of the society that people have relied on. I am not in favor of pulling the carpet. Is that the right word? Or,
I think that's fine. Yeah, sure.
pulling the carpet out from under them.
Yeah,
I do think that we as a people are at fault for what we've caused, right? I don't, I don't ever really blame politicians, other than their own abject wickedness that has been apparent. But the reason that they're there is because we as a people and as a society put them
you
there,
get the
right?
government that
So,
you deserve.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so I've made that argument for years. So in the same way, we have created these safety factors or these safety cushions for people in our society who are lesser off. Um, for us to just pull the rug out from under them would lead to potential starvation, death, suicide, and other bad things. And I would not be in favor of that. I would just like the debate over the abolitionists and the incrementalists. Is that the right word?
I think so.
Right.
Well, I know what you're
The
talking
it,
about at least. Yeah.
the if I've got the word wrong there, I apologize. But essentially, um, the different tactics for fighting abortion. I would also I'm more on the incremental side. Um, I would love for it to be gone completely, but poking and frustrating the process so that more and more people feel dissuaded or unable to get abortions. Like overturning Roe
Yeah.
v. Wade
Right.
was a good incremental step because it allowed a bunch of states to frustrate a whole bunch of women and corrupt men who
Yeah.
wanted their women to get abortions from getting abortions without driving and spending money and travel and
Right.
all kinds of stuff to put themselves up. Now we want a national ban. I don't even think we have to pass a law for that because of the nature of our constitution. But the court should just say, can't murder people whether they're
Yeah.
born or unborn,
Right.
right? But that, God willing, will come in the future. But in the same way, I would be like, let's incrementally get rid of this. Just like I think the argument's being made right now that we have to incrementally figure out how to get rid of Social Security and other
Mm.
stuff
Yeah.
that is
Right.
bankrupting, continuing to increase the debt, right? So
Right.
it may
Yeah.
eventually bankrupt us. But as long as the dollar's the global currency, we do what we want. It's just
Right.
honest truth.
Yep.
But if it ever stops being that, do the BRICS nations, um, and their BRICS currency, we're in 10 years or so, we might be in trouble. But those kind of things can be incrementally dealt with, and so I don't want to just pull the rug. Going back to my analogy, and do that to people. I hope that makes sense. And I'm not opposed to maybe an incremental step being to pass certain things off to the state level and the local level, and try to encourage it that way and incentivize that with states getting some kind of tax breaks and stuff.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
So the problem with all of this is like, we're talking about the same limitations that occur for the federal government when we ask it to handle compassionate stuff. It's just way too big for it. In the same breath, this is a level of nuance that it's very hard to hope that the federal government can even do this. Like, cause it comes in like a bulldog or just a bull, and it leaves like a bull, and it leaves destruction in its wake, and it can't do anything else. You can't put the bull in the china shop and expect it not to leave a mess, whether it's there or it's left. And that's the problem with. So don't bring the bull into the china shop in the first place, is what I
Yeah,
think.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
You're gonna break things.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So, um, you sent me a lot more quotes and a lot more images than we've talked about. Is before we go to dealing with the
oh,
comments, is
you
there anything
you
in
could.
particular you want to hit?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to give some examples, if you want to turn off the heat map for a second,
Sure.
can you turn on the two wrong orders of love,
Yep,
the
I'll do
red
that.
and the red and the um
Well, I can do them one at a time.
yeah, one at a time. That's fine. Yeah, turn on whichever one you want. This was part of the post I saw from somebody uh, on X recently that gave this. So you've got this was what they labeled the Pharisee Ordo Amoris, which was what was in essence, getting back to the Good Samaritan tale and how Jesus was poking at the wrong ordering of love that the Jews had in his time. They loved God, then self, then family, and then nation and tribe, and then it stops being green after that, right?
Right, right.
And so the Samaritan was someone they would have hated, right? These mixed northern tribes that were corrupted after the exile of Babylon when Babylon sent uh, people back into northern area to live there who were, I think, Assyrians or whatever, and they said, "Oh, the animals of that land are killing us because the deity in that land." And then they were
Right.
like, "Here, send some Jews back in, some Hebrews back in to what was it, to teach them how to worship Yahweh, right?" And then from that point on, in the times of the Gentiles or whatever you want to call that, um, the northern areas and tribes were corrupted, so they weren't even seen as Israelites anymore. And by Jesus' day, they hated all other nations and of course their enemies, right?
Yep.
They wanted their Messiah. We all know they wanted their Messiah to come and overthrow Rome and and kill their enemies. So that's the maybe a racial ethnocentric um, hateful ordering of love, where nothing beyond your specific people group goes out. And of course, obviously, Jesus said many things contrary to that, like loving your enemies and the Great Commission,
Yeah.
and disciple all nations.
Right.
And then now here you get to the Ordo Amoris of the liberal viewpoint, which is I think we saw that some in responses. I don't have any quotes with me, but I think that the liberal criticisms of JD Vance aired on the we shouldn't favor anyone. We should just love everyone equally. And everybody's like posting memes about who would you save, your kid or some stranger you don't know from Adam,
Right. Yeah.
when faced with a choice, right? Who are you going to save? And obviously, according to this, you'd have no way to know who to save.
Yeah.
It
Right.
might be blind luck because you can see all the circles are the same color green. So you might as well just love your neighbor you might as well just love your enemy as much as you love God.
Sure.
Right? Love
Yeah.
love Satan as much as you love God in that ordering of love, which is really wild and crazy. But again, that just goes back to abstract love of humanity or abstract love of everything,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Is almost always love of self that Dostoevsky said, which is really a hatred of everyone else because you're just selfishly saying. And to tie back into Sanger, I think she talked about that, right? She said she has a quote in there, or I don't know if she's quoting somebody or she's saying it, but where she is saying that people give charity to make themselves feel better,
Something like,
basically.
yeah. Yeah.
It's somewhere in that article, and I was like, yeah, like that's ultimately what this mindset imbibes is we, the government takes care of that. I don't need to.
Yeah. Right.
I don't have to worry about this. Hands off.
Yeah.
And we love everybody equally, and
Yeah.
then they go home to their dog or their cat because they're not married, they have no children, and they're gonna die alone.
Ooh.
Sorry.
Ouch.
I'm sorry. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So the thing that bothers me about this image that we have on the screen right now is that it has God in the center, and there's a lot of liberals that don't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
So what I have found with those people is that the the nation and tribe circle actually goes to the place where God would be. And
That's helpful.
I think because of that, I think the whole. I mean, obviously, there are liberals that believe in God, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
those ones, this little chart still works. But for those other people, and I think there's a lot of them, it's an entirely different um, frame of reference that they have with their order of love, because they might still have. So if Margaret Sanger were to do this, it would, in the very center, it would have nation/tribe, and it would be a very dark green, like we saw with the other ones for like God, like God has the emphasis in the other ones. She would have put nation/tribe as like that's the emphasis, and
Yeah.
then after that, and so I think even with this view, it doesn't help us really communicate well with the people who have the other worldview, which is, I think, why I kind of personally emphasize the idea of, like, let's say you were going to have a system of governance where you argue over who's going to get the stick to beat people with.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can either have your guy have the stick and he beats you to crap, or it can be the other guy with the stick and he beats you to crap. Or you can have what I believe is you have no stick. Get rid of the stick. Don't let the guy have a stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the to me, like, if I'm trying to communicate with the person who has the state in the center, it's, hey, you can't count on having an elected official as president, we'll say, who has your values forever. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable. It's inevitable that somebody with your values, and this is for them, and this is a lesson for us as well. It's inevitable that somewhere along the line, someone with stick will be someone who does not have your values. So we can keep going this way, or we can just take the stick away.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and in what I guess would you call that viewpoint
Uh,
in
are,
terms of what you're getting
are
at?
we being nice?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Uh, we'll call him a statist.
Yeah, no, not not
STAST.
not them, right? Yeah,
Oh,
but I'm talking about your viewpoint. Sorry,
oh,
not
yeah,
your
I
point.
gotcha.
Yeah, what would you call your was is there something you could categorize for us?
Not very well, but we'll call it libertarian, even though it's not
Okay,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah, that's
great.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing that came to mind is that the reason that happens, right, functionally is because God is the highest authority, right?
Yeah.
So if you suppress the knowledge of God, as Romans 1 says, unbelievers do, if you suppress the knowledge of God and just say he doesn't exist, um, the next highest power that is visibly
Right.
discernible to someone
Right.
is obviously the state,
Yeah.
right? Or the government, right? You could talk about angels and demons as well, but I mean they're all in one. I think Paul in Colossians chapter 1 says both visible and invisible principalities and powers, right? So those are all kind of categorically. But so people naturally defer to the government when they remove God from their um, mind, because that's the next highest authority that can cause them trouble, right?
Yep.
They would
Right.
need to worry
Yep.
about submitting to or showing obeisance. I can't ever get that word right. Um, obeisance um, to that structure and entity. So yeah, it's not gonna you're not gonna replace it with anything else, because that's the most powerful thing in the world next to after you delete God from your thinking. But I guess there's always that aspect of Romans 13 where Paul tells us and gives us a category for even the Roman Empire, right? At
Yep.
that time, Peter Peter tells us in his epistle to honor Caesar, right? And you're just like, wow, what that's pretty strong
Yeah. Right.
right there. We're a
Right.
long way away from Constantine.
That's right. Yeah.
Honoring
Absolutely.
Caesar's a bit of a frog in your throat or
Yeah.
choke, but
Absolutely.
hard thing to swallow. But given those things, right? That's why you do want. You can't guarantee it, but that's why you do want to elect representatives who are responsible people. And I know we might be going to get to that some of that chat portion, but where Matt was asking about, I think, a mono-religious culture and ethnic culture and things like that, and the questions about um, pluralism and multiculturalism that have plagued us. That the reason that you have to worry about who's going to get the stick is because we've given up our
Right.
identity as a people.
Yeah. Right.
We just we don't have a healthy identity as a people anymore, and therefore you we all revert back to let's just limit the power even more. Let's take the stick away even more, whereas that's not necessarily the the ultimate solution. That's all I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
my only pushback is that we've put ourselves in that situation by uh, diluting our society to be something that it no longer is. Right? It's no
Sure.
longer Christian.
Yep.
We're living a post-Christian social and cultural context in a large way, even though our structures are still Christian. Our our forms and even our constitutions are still Christian, largely. Both federal and state still reference God in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yes, where do we want to go from here? What's
So here's what I'd like to do. It's okay if we go past my 8 o'clock limit. That's not a big deal.
okay?
But what I would like to do, hide that. I'm going to give you a chance to go and Matt has been posting,
Okay,
but I've only like skimmed it. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this time to actually read what he's been writing.
sure.
And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna like give a kind of like a podcast summary, just kind of a little bit of like what we're all about, and
Awesome. I'll
and
mute
then
myself.
and then I'll let you talk, and then I'll go read what Matt has said, and then we'll go from there. So I'll let you have a chance to now read that, and I'll go into my other stuff. So um, here we go. All right. So if you've been watching this, thank you. We 5 concurrent viewers right now. Holy crap! It's like, I mean, wow. right? So I hope that I have not seen any evidence so far that that anyone is lagging. My analytics say that the stream health is still really good. So what I did is I already told you at the very beginning that I moved a fan over. I replaced the fan that was cooling my CPU, and so I'm hoping that really is the solution to the problem. Um, but I one of the reasons I want to go back to this, that the reason why it's not quite entirely true. Like, one of the main purposes of this whole podcast is to give my authors that I publish an opportunity to be platformed in a way. So I'm going to just sort of mention them right now. I'm going to make them really big, and it looks like I have to also put them up higher. So, like, we don't have a Patreon at this point, and I don't know if we ever will, because what we have is, like, we have artists that we try to support, people that I publish, and here's one of them. Sam Packin, his recent book, A Bed in Sheol, recently out. We published Jesse Seed quite a few years ago now. So, if you want to support the podcast, which obviously I hope that you do, go out and buy these books. Buy a lot of them, actually, while you're at it, and tell people about them. And then another book that we recently published is Gemini. Looks like I need to make this a little bit bigger too. Push him up. There we go. I really like this one. We've had a lot of it should be pretty clear from the stream that I'm a Christian, and our guests are probably more likely than not going to be Christians. But it's not meant to be a Christian podcast per se. And our publishing is also not strictly limited to Christians. It's what we look for when we publish a book is it a good book? And Anthony Ty Rodriguez is not a Christian. He's actually an atheist. He does happen to be pretty sympathetic to Christian values, actually, which is kind of, I should bring him on sometime to talk about that. But this book here that we publish is about these are Romans, the people on the front that you see there. They're like twins who they're Roman nobles who live in England. I don't remember, like 300 AD or whatever. And they're really struggling with the rise of Christianity in the Roman context. And as a quasi-historian, he really captures that tension really well, but not as a Christian. So I really enjoyed that, because especially now we can look back and see how Christianity prevailed in Roman society. So if you want to support this podcast, I'll just move this down now. Obviously, like, subscribe, notify, and every time that we post something regarding the podcast, share it. We can't do it without you, and that's just the way it is. I feel almost mercenary for saying it, but it's just the reality. We can't succeed without you. That's the bottom line. And we're not going to ask you for money, but I will ask you to consider buying our books. So these are 3 of the books that we publish. And actually, the Pivot of Civilization, which we've been featuring at the very beginning, is also a book that I publish as well. So with that said, Glenn, I'm going to turn it over to you to respond to the comments. And now I'm going to go read the comments so that I can respond to them. All right, so you're up.
Yes. I think I was pretty much caught up there when you finished. But yeah, there were some questions early on that I was trying to address just there a moment ago about multiculturalism and things like that. There was a question he asked about is libertarianism practical, a multicultural society seems to divide and vote along tribal lines. Just to give an idea behind that, I do think we've seen those kind of limitations for quite a while in our voting patterns in our society. I still remember vividly how much hate I got in the end of college. I got asked to be the one conservative representative. I was in student government, had a friend who was going to do it, and he was like, "Oh, I can't do it that night," but they were going to have a live panel in one of the university center rooms for the campus on the importance of the upcoming election and voting and all that. It was the Kerry v. Bush um, election in 2004. And at some point, I told one young black lady that she should not register to vote or vote for single selfish reasons. And the entire room like erupted. Thankfully, nobody was trying to hurt me. They were just very, very upset. Like I said, I was the only conservative on the panel. There were some members of I think the city council there, and just some other teachers and stuff. And they were, any inclination that you would tell somebody not to register to vote, not to exercise their vote, because they're too selfish to vote correctly for society. I think that gets at some of the multiculturalism and the voting patterns where individual minorities are told to vote for their own self interests, right? And they might not even have good legitimate self interest, right? They might just be thinking, oh, the government will give me more money if I vote for candidate C over here instead of candidate A or B. And so I'm, that's a whole nother conversation to have. I won't break that one too wide open about the where we're at today with the egalitarian right to vote. But there is a history of voting patterns there that has definitely brought us to where we are. He mentions the debt. Let's see. He was concerned about whether we would get, whether the voting, how significant the voting patterns will change. I know people have run some statistics on this current election, and there were larger Hispanic and black votes for Trump than ever before, as I recall. So there's some hope there, right? We might not be off a cliff in terms of voting patterns there. When people, a great analogy, going back to, so I can tie this back to part of our discussion, the Ordo Amoris, was I saw one pastor on X gave a good analogy after Vance's comments, or actually his analogy might have been last year when this Vance is really just talking about stuff that's been going on for a past year or more, like online, right? Yeah. That's why so many people, when Vance said what he did, said Vance is reading us, right? Because he's connected, right? And then you also got Barron Trump who told him to go on the podcasts and all that stuff going on. Those are some wise things that we're seeing, and people are actually, our government representatives at the highest levels are actually wanting to represent their people. Praise God for that. I've never seen that in my lifetime. Right. There may be some levels in which governors and localist politicians did represent their people well, but at the federal level, I have never regarded anybody dating back to probably Bush Sr. or Clinton as really seeking to represent us as a people. They've all, I've known to say that they've all been the same person.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Until Trump got elected, we all just had the same generic person.
Yeah.
In the White House, approved by the elites and such. But but with that said, getting back to the Order of Morris, um, the uh, what was it? Oh no, am I going to lose my thought? I hate when that happens. We're getting too old.
Yeah.
Um,
Or it could be the
what was it?
whiskey.
Yeah, it could be the whiskey. I didn't have too much. Here, I'll take another sip and see if
Uh-huh.
it comes back to me.
Yeah, right.
Um, yeah, if I think of it, I'll let you know. Do you remember what I said before that example? It was tied to the
Before what example?
um, of or right after my example of when I was in college for that panel.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was reading
No,
the
that's okay.
chat at that point.
Yeah, but you know you might notice some things in terms of comments you want to make that bring that back up.
Okay.
But basically, there's that aspect of society that's confused with the Order of Morris. Oh, that's what it was. The pastor's example. I knew it was an example that I was trying to give you, and what he detailed was like, this is for Matt, right? You're asking about voting patterns and the way society might change and what risk we are at uh, having successfully by a large margin reelected Trump with a Vice President JD Vance ticket. But um, what's happening right now related to the Order of Morris on a governmental level, the analogy was this. It would be like if you analogize the government to a family setting, right? What we've spent probably the last 2 decades watching is the father, right? Government taking all of the father's wealth and income and his job and going across town to help people that have nothing to do with his family
Yeah.
and neglecting his children at home, right? So the children are starving, the children are neglected, they don't have any there's no attention being given to them, right? And now that we've reelected Trump, the father has in some sense legitimately repented
Mm.
of
Yeah.
what it was doing.
Right.
And it's like we're going to stop supporting all these people over here that we were giving all our money to. We're gonna actually feed our citizens. We're gonna actually protect them. We're going to kick out the bad people. We're going to, you know, give them some needed attention, right? And it's rightly ordering the government's love towards the people it's responsible for.
Right.
And that's why that's why nationalism is so important right now in our day, because what we all grew up being told to fight, and doesn't a lot of church backgrounds were all united on this fact, is that we needed to fight the globalists, right? Like we needed to fight against the one world governments and the United Nations and these things that just further ripped our identity out as peoples and just tried to generically create a blob of humanity, right? Because that's what one
Yeah.
world or globalist government does, is it creates a blob of humanity with no distinctions and no ability to truly give real charity and
Yeah.
real love to those people, because they don't know us. They're
Yeah.
made up of a bunch of different national leaders that are probably there because of corruption and monetary
Yeah. Right.
issues, right? So anyway, I'm not trying to run a hobby horse here, but I'm just saying I want all of us to tie that back to the Order of Loves and look at it from a governmental standpoint. The government has not ordered itself correctly in our lifetimes,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that government suddenly order itself correctly. And the hope is, by God's grace, obviously, the hope is that the people, even though we're in kind of a post-Christian multicultural nightmare of mixed, a bunch of different soups that's been mixed together, um, and people don't share those values, they'll at least see the value of government taking care of its people, and then we might could work towards catastrophic cliffs, right? That we've all been driving towards, right? The national debt and the invasion of people that we can't sustain and import, care for ourselves, right? Like, just those are just a few things, but it's encouraging to see, and I think that people might actually be happy for once. Like, I mean, it's crazy to say that.
Yeah.
I haven't been happier with my government than I am right now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I refraining from going at length at how unhappy I've been the last 4 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you for that. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna turn you off.
Okay.
Say a few words. You'll be able to still hear them because we have our own secret side channel going. So
Okay.
you can say goodbye.
Okay. Say goodbye. Did you want me to say anything about where you can find me?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do that
Yeah.
right now.
Okay. Yeah. So real quick, our church website's trinitychattanooga.com. If you're in the Chattanooga area or visiting through, you can always come visit us. And then I'm most active publicly on X, and you can find me at IDOTF or I.F, which is short for In Defense of the Faith. IDOTF on X. And yeah, it's been great to be here, and a true pleasure to reconnect online with
Yeah.
you,
We're
Anthony.
gonna have you again. It's gonna be great.
It'll be great. Yeah,
There's
thank you.
we talked for about an hour and a half here, and there's still so much to say. So, yeah, thank you for being on, and I'm gonna turn you off now and close it up.
Bye bye.
All right. So, thank you, Glenn, for being on, and someone might have to remind me to include him. Put that information right in the description because I'm a little bit have problems with remembering to do that kind of thing. So I just wanted to respond also to some of the things that Matt said, and I guess I'll just be real brief about it. So he in the chat, which I hope that I have the settings so that people who watch this later can see it. Talks about the two giant cliffs that we are approaching or may already have fallen off of: national debt and demographics. So one of the areas of study for me has actually been the demographic one. In the 1970s, it was decided by the elites that there was going to be too many people and we were all going to die by the year 2000. And Elon Musk has done a really good job of calling attention to this demographic cliff. I don't know if this is in the realm of charity or charitable, like incentivizing or not, but I think there's a real problem when we put the government in charge of anything related to reproduction. I think you're asking for trouble for the same reasons that I already explained about how if you give the government a stick, the chances are sometimes someone's going to be elected who you don't agree with, who now has the stick, and he proceeds to beat you with it. And so that's kind of the same kind of thing, the same kind of concern that I have. But the problem that we have right now in that respect, and it's just gonna have to be another podcast because there's so much to cover with it. But the problem that we have right now is in the 70s, the powers that be decided that there's too many people, and if we don't do something to limit the number of people, we're all gonna die. And now we are beginning to see a situation where, like, our systems, our institutions are not going to work because there are not enough people to support them. And China already discovered this. They had the one-child policy, and as a result of the one-child policy, because of their culture there, they almost always only had men, and so now they can't even figure out a way to get the population up because there's more women than there are women, and it's totally screwed them up, and they're going to have a demographic winter as it speaks, which is kind of coming up. So again, the connection with charity per se is tenuous, I think, in this context. But the people who worked to limit the population were in the charity business. So for USAID was at the forefront of reducing the population. There's a guy named Ravenholt in the 70s and early 80s. So, they were like this was their thing. And I don't think that a lot of people realize that their so-called charitable instincts, as manifested through the federal government, were being utilized to tell people to only have one kid, or better yet, none. But that's exactly what was happening. So it definitely calls attention to one of the dangers of giving a government the size and scope of our federal government these kinds of authorities, the amount of influence that it has. Because just as with China, they wrecked their country, they're wrecking it, and now they're trying to recover, and there's just not enough. It almost sounds ridiculous to say it like this, but there's just not enough women for them to recover. But we have a similar problem here that's growing as well. I'm kind of getting sidetracked a little bit and trying to I have so much to say, I don't know precisely what to say. The bottom line is, I guess we'll put it this way, is if our federal government decides to give up the charity business, we're going to have to decide on our own what our priorities are, and we're going to have to step in, and we're going to have to step into that gap. And it's a problem in the sense that we're not used to it. We're used to being able to delegate this off to somebody else, and now it's going to be up to us to do it. And that's a good thing, but there's going to be growing pains. I understand that, and you should understand that too. But we have to do it because it's just going to be the way it is. Even if you wanted to continue to have the federal government do these, quote, charitable functions, it just can't afford it. There is no money. They take in tax revenue every year, and it's not even a fraction of what is required to pay for the actual budget and the actual expenses. There just isn't money. So that will probably pop. But regardless of that, or in light of that fact, it's going to be up to us to step in and help our neighbors. So thank you, Glenn, for being with me tonight to talk about just who our neighbor is. And we're going to have to talk again, I can tell. And I think I better just sort of wrap it up. We're well past the 8 o'clock my time that I have scheduled for this. Thank you for watching this. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Share this. Find us on X. Find our guests on X. And buy every book that we ever promote. And if you're looking for Christmas gifts, buy 20 more. There we go. So this is the Guten Book Press, Guten Cast, signing off. Before I just talk for like forever, we're going to end it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Have a good night. Bye.